Pokemon games aren't typically known for their difficulty. Usually you can just run through them with just one over-leveled Pokemon. But because of this, many fans have created many ways to make the games more challenging. Some fans have created their own versions of the game to make them more difficult, a more popular example being the games such as Emerald Kaizo. Others add self-imposed rules to restrict themselves, the most common of which being a Nuzlocke. Even with the Nuzlocke challenge, people found it too easy, so then they invented the hardcore Nuzlocke. This video will be a guide for hardcore Nuzlocke of the game Renegade Platinum, a very popular choice for new players into the challenge run genre. For those unaware, Renegade Platinum is a fan-made ROM pack made by Drayano, which makes a ton of fights more difficult, adds quality of life changes, and gives the player a lot of freedom in which Pokemon they receive and can use. To give a brief rundown, the main rules of a Nuzlocke are that you can only use the first Pokemon you obtain in every new area, as well as every death is permanent and you must box that Pokemon or release them. The hardcore part of the name comes from the additional rules that we will be adding. For one, we're going to be using set mode instead of switch mode. Additionally, there will be no items used in battle, and there will be a level cap attached to each gym leader that no Pokemon will be allowed to pass. Before going into the guide, I want to mention some of the various resources that are out there for the game. First is the damage calculator, which allows you to better plan safe strategies for all of the boss fights in the game, allowing for a more strategic gameplay. Second is the change documents, since a ton of Pokemon in Renegade Platinum have changes to them that make them either better or worse. Secondly, there's the Nuzlocke app tracker, which allows you to track all of the encounters you've gotten throughout the game and compare your Pokemon to see which types you're lacking or have a multitude number of. Fourth is Repel Manipulation, which will be discussed more later. And fifth is PK Hex, which will allow you to edit your save file to add an item that would otherwise be too tedious to obtain normally. PK Hex will also allow you to check the IVs of your Pokemon so you can see what their strengths and weaknesses are right after you catch them. Now, with all of this in place, we're going to move on to the first split of the game, which is the work split. Since this is the first split I'm talking about, I'll be more in depth with this than other splits. The first big decision is actually in the player character, since depending on which one you pick, your rival will have different teams here, though this change isn't really all that important. The first decision that actually matters is your starter Pokemon, and luckily for this game, all three of them are very good. Chimchar becomes the fast and powerful Fire and Fighting Infernape, which is great in combination with items such as the Focus Sash, Life Orb, and Choice items. With it, you can one-shot and sweep a whole bunch of teams, such as Gym Leader Byron, and both of its abilities are very good. Turtwig will become the Grass and Ground type Torterra, a very consistent encounter thanks to Shell Armor, which blocks all critical hits. Torterra is very reliant on IVs though, much more than Chimchar. However, with good IVs, it becomes a great Elite Four Pokemon. It is worth noting that a Torterra with Overgrow is significantly worse than one with Shell Armor, so if you happen to get one with Overgrow, it's pretty worth it to just reset. The last starter is Piplup, who turns into the Water Steel type Empoleon, which is an amazing type combination, resisting more than half of all types. It's a guaranteed Steel type, which is always nice to have, however, Water types are pretty common. Even with its common Water type, Empoleon is still a great support and bulky asset, allowing it to wall a ton of different Pokemon. However, it gives you the hardest rival team. It's worth noting that your starter's Met location will say that it's 201. Some people include a clause that allow this starter to count as a separate encounter, however, it's up to you to do that or not. It's very important to note that you can get another starter in Sand Gem Town, and this one won't affect your rival's team. Your rival, depending on what starter you pick, will rotate between Arcanine, Breloom, and Azumarill, so make sure to plan that out when you pick your starter. Additionally, before you get gifted Pokeballs, you'll be given an Eevee from your mom. It is important to note if you want to evolve this Eevee into an Umbreon, you'll want it to be male for a future fight strategy. The first few routes are fairly easy. After you get the 3 gift Pokemon, you'll be able to start catching Pokemon. If you played with the starter clause, you'll get 3 encounters, otherwise you'll get 2 before Jubilife. Before moving on, I want to mention a mechanic known as Repel Manipping. Basically, if you lead with a certain level Pokemon in the front of your party, you can guarantee certain Pokemon. For example, on Route 202, if you lead with a level 6 Pokemon, you have a 50-50 shot of either Poochyena or Growlithe. While I won't mention all Repel Manips, I'll make sure to mention the most important ones. Once you get to Jubilife, a lot of the early game opens up. I'll try to mention as much as I can before the next rival fight. A very important encounter is once you beat a news reporter in the Pokemon Center, she'll be giving you a Kanto starter, and all 3 of them in this game are very good. While Blastoise now gets Drizzle, you have a very high chance of getting Pelipper later in the game, who also gets Drizzle. And now Charizard is Fire and Dragon type with Levitate, however, it doesn't super excel in anything. A thick fat Bulbasaur is probably the best encounter here, as you can use it as a great wall with Leech Seed and Toxic. Another additional encounter you can get in Jubilife is a Pokemon egg in the trainer school, which will have any random baby Pokemon. The big winners from this baby egg are Munchlax, Riolu, Elekid, and Happiny, with Blissey being so good that a lot of runners ban it. While Mantine is very good, Mantike has an annoying evolution, otherwise it'd be a great pickup here. By going west from Jubilife, you can pick up a fishing rod, and then go to Route 218 to go pick up a fishing encounter, with the best one being Magikarp. Gyarados is the best Nuzlocke encounter, getting a great move pool, having amazing stats, and a fantastic ability in Intimidate. You can also go back to south of Sandgem Town for Route 219 and pick up a fishing encounter there. While Route 204 has nothing worth noting, you should hatch your egg in case you get Budew first, since Budew can be found on this route and could be used as a dupe's clause. A notable Repel Manip in Ravage Path is a 50-50 between Geodude and Zubat, both becoming great Pokemon later on. Golem is a great physical tank that can also do a lot of damage, while Crobat is very fast and has a great defensive typing. The first boss of the game will be a rival fight on Route 203, however, this fight is not very hard, other than a Metronome Munchlax, which has the possibility to KO a Pokemon if you're unlucky. A strategy that can be used on the Munchlax is evolving your Chimchar into Monferno since it evolves at level 14, and using Mach Punch. Generally, every encounter from this point forward until the first gym are very good, except for Whismur. So don't try to overthink all the routing. Once you get to Orberg City, you have the opportunity to be given a Hoenn starter, and while all of them are very good, I wouldn't recommend picking any of them, because they don't compare to a gift Beldum you get from Steven. Beldum and later Metagross is one of the best Pokemon in the game, and one you surely don't want to pass on. Before the first gym, you're given a choice to evolve your Eevee into any of its evolutions. Generally, the best ones considered are Umbreon, Flareon, and Jolteon, however all are very good. If you wish to go with Umbreon, I suggest delaying the evolution so that how you can learn Wish and Charm from level up. Before the first gym, you have the opportunity to get many good items and berries by using the move Covet with Eevee to steal from wild Pokemon. The Rourke Gym boss is the first real challenging fight of the game, however, there are some consistent strategies for each of his Pokemon. I'd say the main threats in this fight are the Larvitar and the Cranidos, however, a Beldum can be good against Cranidos, though it might risk crit. The good thing about this boss is thanks to the level 16 level cap, a ton of Pokemon such as the starters can evolve, and they can be a great help for this fight. Even though Turtwig can't evolve into Grotle at this point, it's still a good bring here, since Bullet Seed can deal a lot of damage, and Shell Armor makes it very consistent against Pokemon such as a Larvitar. A common lead on this fight is either Monferno or a ground type such as Geodude, since the Nosepass only has Shockwave, so it can't hit ground types, and with Monferno, you can use Taunt to make it only go for Shockwave. Overall, this fight is not very challenging, and if you level up all your Pokemon to 16, you should have no issues with this fight, but it is the introduction to the difficulty within this game. After this fight, you are finished with the Rourke split, and now we'll be moving on to the Gardenia split. While not as long as the Rourke split, still has some great encounters to mention. In addition to the many new encounters you'll get, there is an increased level cap to level 26, allowing for a lot of new evolutions, such as Magikarp in the Gyarados and Turtwig in the Grotle. Once you get to Floroma Town, you'll get both a Johto starter and Honey, and with the Johto starters, there's a clear winner for which one is the best. While Meganium now gets a Fairy type, and Feraligatr now gets a Dark type with Intimidate, they don't compare to a potential Adaptability Typhlosion, which with Eruption can become insane for late game. While a Blaze Cyndaquil is it's worth checking its IVs first, since it can still be the best of all the encounters there. A Typhlosion with a non-hindering nature and okay IVs with adaptability can be an easy Elite Four bring, as with Eruption, it can completely sweep Aaron. Thanks to the honey that you can get at this split, you can run into wild Munchlax who will always have leftovers. Using Covet with Eevee, you can steal those leftovers and give it to your whole team if you want. While the Mars fight can be tricky, she only has 4 Pokemon, so you can use multiple of your own Pokemon to counter the Purugly, for example. Other than the Purugly, the only real threat on this fight is Yanma, as an Omni Boost from Silverwind can be very dangerous. A new boss fight this game adds, that wasn't in the original Pokemon Platinum, is a fight with Cheryl, which is also not that hard due to her only having 4 Pokemon that are all relatively weak. Monferno can be used against her Chansey, and while Drifloon can be scary if you don't have a good box, it's generally not a big threat. I would recommend using a Repel to make it through Eterna Forest first before getting your encounter, since you're traveling with Cheryl and it will make every encounter a double battle. A notable Repel Manip here is at night you can have an 83% chance for a Misdreavus, who when turns into Mesmagius gets now an additional Fairy typing, which is very solid. At the end of Eterna Forest, you can enter the Old Chateau immediately, which comes with 2 guaranteed amazing encounters, in Gengar and Rotom. By using Repels to get to their static location, you can get either of these very strong Pokemon. While both are great, Rotom in general is more flexible thanks to having all its forms accessible in this game. Also at the Old Chateau comes the best TM in the game, Substitute, since almost every Pokemon can learn it, and it allows for way safer strategies. You'll then reach Eterna City, which from there, there's a lot of potential for great encounters. I'll try to mention all of them. First, if you fish in Mount Coronet, you can get a guaranteed Feebas, which with the now Water and Fairy type Milotic is an amazing encounter. Its new typing makes it an amazing guaranteed encounter, allowing it to be brought to many different fights and the Elite Four in the future. In Eterna City, you can fish up for either Poliwag, Dratini, or Magikarp if you missed it earlier. All 3 of them are very good. On Route 211 East, you have a 10% chance to get Bagon, which when turns into Salamence is a fantastic encounter, though don't bet on getting it because it's so rare. Otherwise, there's not much on 211 worth noting. In this game, you have to go over to Route 216 before you can challenge the gym leader Gardenia, and there you can get a guaranteed Sneasel with a Repel Manip. Weavile in this game now gets the ability Technician, an amazing buff to an already great Pokemon. With it, you can also use it as an Elite Four Pokemon, and it's a very rare Ice type that's very early on in the game. While some trainers on Route 216 can be pretty scary, the scariest of any optionals up to this point, they usually aren't too bad if you just look at their team ahead of time and make a soft plan. The trainers within the Eterna City Gym also aren't too bad, as long as you have good team synergy to deal with grass types. Gardenia herself is a very scary boss, much scarier than Rourke in my opinion. However, there are some strategies that will allow you to get through her. Firstly, if you have a Crobat, you could set up a substitute on turn 1 and sweep her entire team, since Blossom will just spam Stun Spore on your lead Crobat. Even if you don't have a Crobat, there are other ways to deal with her team. For example, a Metang can be used against her Roserade, even though it might have to risk a few crits. Watch out for some coverage moves, for example the Thunder Punch on Breloom. If you haven't used the damage calculator before this point, I suggest using it for this fight, since it will get you more familiar with it, and it's the first fight that it's genuinely needed for, unless you have Crobat. After defeating Gardenia, you have officially conquered the split, and will now be moving on to the Fantina split, which is very short. That'll conclude the first part for this Renegade Platinum guide. If this gets enough attention, I will try to make future guides for the remaining splits in the game. Thank you for watching.